Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Jeremy Forrester, one of the college counsellors in ACS Cobham. Today I'm really excited to present to you the topic of interviews for UK universities. So thank you very much for attending, and this will be recorded, and so we'll be able to then make it available for you to view later on the PSL in the college counselling section under the page interviews. This and the recording of the US University Interviews webinar, which was done last week, will also be made available in the same page, along with a range of other resources to supplement both presentations. Now, when we think about the subject of interviewing, most people believe that most UK universities don't actually interview their applicants. Well, don't be so sure, because they are likely to crop up with certain courses and in certain places. So during this presentation, we're going to review that and have a bit of a deep dive into some of the types of questions that you can have and ways to start answering those questions in an interview as well. Now, it's important to be aware that interviews are only one part of the university admissions process. Along with your predicted grades, your UCAS reference, your personal statement, your submitted work where it's been requested, and your entry test results as well, wherever that may be applicable. Interviews usually happen towards the end of the application process, and it's a really good way for universities to compare different applicants who have a good chance of being offered a place. They're more likely to be held for the creative and care-related courses, as well as for Oxford and Cambridge. The majority are actually discussion-based with a course tutor of the subject that you're applying to, but there are exceptions to this, as we'll be addressing throughout the presentation. Being asked to attend an interview is the mark of an excellent application, but you will be competing against other strong applicants, so it's really important to be well prepared. This slide here is from Cambridge, and it addresses why they interview. To distinguish amongst excellent applications by probing their academic qualities, to assess the skills and aptitudes essential for being a successful student at higher education, with reference to whether or not the student has actually understood the nature of the course, what the motivation of the student is, their ability to do problem solving and critical thinking skill abilities, as well as testing their relevant current knowledge base. Now, it's important to understand that not all interviews will be as rigorous as Cambridge or Oxford, and some interviews will be a case of having a two-way process where you can learn a little bit more about the university and the university can learn a little bit more about you. So there are several types of interviews which we'll be addressing later on in the presentation. So what are interviewers looking for? Interviewers want to find out exactly what you have to offer, that you're taking your career decisions seriously and that you're prepared for university life and study. By showing passion for your subject and outside interest while having a genuine interest and knowledge in the course and the university itself, you'll come across as a well-rounded individual with the potential to thrive in the environment of university. There are several qualities an interviewer is looking for the applicant to demonstrate during the interview. While an applicant may think that the most obvious thing interviewers are looking for is excellent factual knowledge, this is actually already displayed through your exams and your results. So whilst having an excellent depth of knowledge might help you perform better during interviews, you are unlikely to be chosen solely on the basis of your knowledge. The main thing an interviewer is really looking for is that you can demonstrate critical thought, excellent problem solving skills, and an intellectual flexibility, as well as motivation for the subject, suitability to study at university, and in some cases, like Oxford and Cambridge, suitability for small group teaching. It's important for them to see that you are willing to persevere with a challenging problem, even if your answer is not immediately apparent. This aspect is found in some of the more challenging interviews, such as the Oxford and Cambridge interviews. How likely you're going to have an interview can be seen by looking at it from two different lenses. You can see it through the lens of looking at the university that you're applying to. Do they regularly interview? Another way you can approach this is to decide whether or not your course is one of those courses that regularly interviews. It's hard to give a clear and hard, fast rule as to will I be expected to interview, but the best way is to try to find a best fit list of universities based on your preferences, levels attainment, and the course itself, and then check their application pages on their website. Most are actually quite transparent about whether or not they interview. Lots of universities interview for a range of different reasons and different candidates. I think Oxbridge, which is Oxford and Cambridge combined, is unusual in the fact that it interviews a lot of its applicants, but interviews are still a routine part of the admissions for a lot of other universities as well. Here are just a few that I've selected for us to look into to see whether or not they interview. So Oxford and Cambridge, or Oxbridge universities, they do interview. Oxford and Cambridge will not offer candidates a place without an interview, regardless of the course. But they're not the only ones. Imperial College London and UCL, or University College London, will also interview most of their applications too. However, LSE is not very likely to interview. But it's not just only Oxford, Cambridge and the London universities that do interview. There are some other universities that are likely to interview, such as Nottingham, Bath, Warwick, Birmingham, and I know King's College London is in London, but they're also likely to interview as well. Some universities will interview mostly just to gauge your interest in the course, and also in some cases to try to convince you to choose their university. Some universities also conduct Skype interviews to ensure that international students are actually capable of speaking fluent English. So Oxbridge and London universities aren't the only ones that conduct interviews. Even universities such as Derby will also interview too. Queen Mary and Sussex may also interview as well, in examples such as borderline cases if you're quite close to the entry requirements. However, there are some universities, as you can see, that are unlikely to interview. So as we've already mentioned, LSE, but then we also have St Andrews, which is not very likely to interview, except if you're applying for medicine. And Manchester are unlikely to interview, except if you're applying for engineering. So it's important to be aware that even though a university may be unlikely to interview, there are always exceptions to the rule as well. There is no hard, fast rule as to whether or not a particular university will always interview. So here are some courses that are very likely to interview: medicine, dentistry, nursing, education, music, art and design, and in engineering, some universities will. Courses that are less likely to interview include STEM subjects such as the biological sciences, chemistry, computer science, mathematics, but as well as the social sciences like English, politics, history, and geography. However, some of these courses may actually ask you to interview if, for example, they may be at a prestigious university. So now just looking at an example of a few universities. Imperial College London, some departments might ask you to participate in group tasks and selection activities or attend an interview during the open day. For some degrees, such as fine art and architecture, the portfolio of work you're asked to bring is really vital to the consideration of your application. Other departments might ask you to take certain tests and exercises during the day, such as a short writing essay. UCL, some courses that tend to interview, well, Most likely, any professional training degrees such as dentistry, primary education, social work and nursing, possibly talent-based degrees such as music, acting, art and design, but you never know. Engineering, sciences and computing may require an interview as well because it's at UCL. Some of the subjects that are least likely to interview include humanities and social science degrees such as English, politics, history and geography. So here's a brief look at what subjects are not likely to be interviewing. So if you're applying for computing, you're less likely to be interviewed. Well, you've got no interview at Nottingham. Occasionally you might have an interview at UEA. And yes, an interview is required for places such as York, Imperial and Birmingham in the subject. For English literature, there are no interviews at Bristol, Cardiff, Durham, Nottingham and Sheffield, but you might have an interview at King's, but you will definitely have an interview if you have applied for Cambridge, Queen Mary, UCL or Warwick. And architecture, to bring a portfolio or go to an interview, that is one of the considerations, and UCL do both. However, a portfolio but not an interview will be required at Kingston, Cardiff, Sheffield and Manchester. These are just examples and certainly not an extensive list. Now, whatever you're applying to, you need to get into the real guts of the department's website, look around the course that you're considering and find out about the interviews, or note it down as one of your questions to ask on the open day. So what are they like, these interviews? Well, just to give you a bit of a flavour about what's in store, I've compiled a few comments from previous students that have shared some of their ideas from their interviews, and these have been arranged through subject rather than university to start with. An architecture student said, "I was told in a letter about the interview to be prepared to answer questions on modern architecture, construction and the building industry, but none were actually asked. However, the interviewer was very interested in all the artwork that was in his portfolio." One Art Foundation student said that there were no questions, just a review of my portfolio. It's really important to make sure that all your good work is in your portfolio and to include a wide range of pieces. Biological sciences. When the interviewer asked me about acid rain, I couldn't answer sufficiently, so I asked him to explain it to me, and he seemed very pleased by the fact that I wanted to learn. After a preliminary conversation and questioning, I was asked to solve some problems on paper. Drama acting student, it was an audition. I had to learn 3 pieces to perform of no more than 2 minutes each. Some Shakespeare in blank verse, a contemporary work, and something of my own choice. Economics. Most of the interview was taken up with questions on maths and statistics, which the interviewer set out for me. I had to do the equations on a board in front of him. Engineering. Most questions somehow related to physics subjects, mechanics, electricity, forces and moments. Geography. Know your subject well. Know current events. Know the reasons why you want to study geography. Law. I had to read a long passage, a side of typed to A4 paper, and then say what was illogical about it. Maths. The interview was more a case of us working together on how to show integration as the opposite of differentiation. He didn't expect me to know how to do it, but he wanted to see how I could think my way through it and solve it with his help. Medicine. They will test you on things such as medical ethics, teamwork, empathy, interpreting graphs and data, communication, hot topics, and other things. Most will have stations that you will go to and answer a question at each station. They even have role-play situations. Here are some tips from universities on what else universities are looking for. The University of Bristol. Among other things, we will ask you about your reasons for wanting to study that particular subject and make sure that you are aware of what the course involves and what the career options are. We will also assess your ability to communicate and to cope with stress. University of Kent will expect you to show knowledge of the course and university and have the ability to present your ideas and arguments well. The University of Oxford, we are looking for evidence that you are thinking independently, that you are willing to engage with new ideas beyond the scope of your school or college syllabus, and that you are committed to your subject. Previous students have made comments on what the interview was like for them in general, rather than subject specific. So some of these were collated, and one said, each of the 5 interviews I had was different. Some of the interviewers preferred to talk to find out more about you and your interests in the subject. Others tested your knowledge with questions, and some more abstract testing our logic abilities. Be prepared to talk about admissions tests. My interview was directly after a test. They'll point you in the right direction. You'll get hints to nudge you in the right direction if you're stuck. The interview was classed as informal, but they expected me to have some of my own questions. You might have a group interview. I had a 2-part interview, group and then individual. In the group interview, I realised it is best to listen to others and to contribute myself, but be yourself. It was like a 2-way process. My interviewer was very approachable and easy to talk to. They shared with me that it was a chance for me to get to know them as much as them learn more about me. So interviews can range from an out loud, it's safe to expect this from Oxbridge interviews, to an informal chat designed to encourage you to choose the course. They can last anything from 10 minutes to an hour and are usually, but though not always, conducted by one interviewer. They can also vary depending on the subject that you're applying to. For example, English may have to discuss a poem with their interviewer, while maths applicants might be asked to solve an equation. So there's an evaluative and an informative style of interview. Prestigious universities usually use the evaluative style, where the performance of the interview will be considered whether or not to offer you a place. And the informative interview is one where you can find more about the university, and they may just be as keen to impress you to go there as you are to impress them. Of course, your university interview may include both evaluative and informative elements. So there's a conventional discussion-based interview. This is when there is a discussion between you and the course tutor. You'll be asked why you want to study the course and what makes you a strong candidate. There can be a task. Some are informal and in group settings. The next is the Oxbridge interviews. The aim is simply not to trick you, but to find out how you react to new situations. Expect the unexpected. There'll be more on this later on in the presentation. The next one is multi-mini interviews, or MMIs, and these are usually used for medicine, where you complete a series of stations. These different stations will test the students in a range of different areas. You can see the different topics that are tested at these stations for medicine here. If you want to find out more about this style of interview, please see me, Mr. Forrester, in order to request to have access to the Medics and Healthcare Society PSL page. I have a lot of resources on there that can help you with this. In other interviews, you might need to bring along a portfolio showing examples of your best work, like for courses for the arts. They'll let you know in advance what tasks they expect you to complete and what things that you need to bring. You can also find out this in Track in UCAS. For those that haven't started applications and have not gone into UCAS yet, other than using it as a tool to search for universities and courses, you'll learn about this more when you come into grade 12. As well as Track, you can email them directly to find out more information about what's required from there. It's always best to actually attend the interview date that they give you, as rescheduling can be quite challenging for some of them, because you usually are interviewing with a tutor or one of the professors. So as a result, they also have other roles to do other than just interviewing the applicants. And it's really important to remember that no two universities will conduct interviews in the exact same way. So you'll be given information about the interview format before you attend. Please make sure you read that before you go. There's no excuse for not being well prepared. So here are some ideas on how to prepare for the interview. Before the day, you need to be well prepared. Plan ahead. Make sure that you attend when they ask. Unless there's an emergency, the university may offer a dress code, but if not, dress in something that you feel comfortable in that won't distract the interviewer from the points that you want to make. But think smart. You're not being assessed on your appearance or the clothes you wear. Dress comfortably. There's no need for a suit, but you'll still need to look professional. So smart trousers or a skirt, along with a shirt or a blouse. Plan your journey. If an overnight stay is involved, plan for this well. Make sure you get there early and that you've got the contact details available in case you need to phone. And make sure you know exactly where the interview is. Look carefully through any material that's sent to you before the interview so you know what to expect when you arrive. Consider the type of interview. Is it evaluative or is it informative? Plan and practice answers for these. Prepare answers for common questions. Most universities ask, why do you want to study the subject? It's hard to predict what questions there are, but the PSL page might give you some good ideas, as well as this presentation. Make sure you've researched your course and university. Revisit the university prospectus and the course details. Think about how you'll answer questions, such as why this course and why this university, what the entry requirements are, and what optional modules are offered as well, amongst other guidance. This will help you show that you've researched your course thoroughly. Plan questions that you can ask yourself. It's a really good idea to refresh your mind on what you've written in your personal statement. Also, thinking carefully about why you've chosen the course is really important. Making notes from your application and reading through your personal statement will help. Be prepared to elaborate on anything that you've said as well. Get up to date with the current affairs relating to your subject. Think about how you can stand out, but in a good way. Think about how you can stand out and leave a good impression. This is your chance to convey your passion for your chosen subject, your future ambitions, your qualities. Think about what you have to take with you. A notepad might come in handy to jot down some of the important points, especially if you have a number of interviews lined up. This will help you to reflect on how you did, decide what worked and what didn't work well, and think of new answers for areas that you want to improve. But if you're looking to study art and design or architecture, make sure you bring a portfolio if requested. But above all, make sure you've slept well the night before. You'll come across so much better during your interview, and you'll be able to think a little bit more clearly on your feet. So here are some interview techniques for the day itself. It's not just about what you say is important. Body language is key to the impression that you're going to give. Make sure you're sitting up straight and you make eye contact and you look and sound interested. It's important to engage the interviewer right from the start. Let your interviewer take the lead when it comes to things like shaking hands or sitting down or when to start talking and so on. Make sure you listen carefully to the question and don't be afraid to take some time to think about your answer or ask them to repeat it. You won't be penalised. Remember, an interview is a two-way process. Make the most of it by finding out as much as you can about the course, including the types of teaching methods, and for getting a feel for whether or not the course and the university are right for you. Whatever the format your interview is, try to contribute to the discussion as well as responding to what your interviewer is asking from you. But above all, remember to relax. When you're relaxed, you're going to interview so much better. So now we're just going to look through a few examples of some questions. A load of resources that have questions already written out with some help as to how to answer them. So to find that, you need to go to the PSL page. You need to go to the High School PSL, click on High School tab to open it, and then you'll be able to find the College Counselling PSL pages. You can use this link that you can see on the left-hand side, but if that's too much typing, I'll show you how to access it here now. How you can find the College Counselling pages through High School College Counselling, and then where to find the Interviews tab. So when you start with the High School, then you need to click on the High School tab here, and then you'll see a range of options cascading below. One of those will be the College Counselling tab. Really important, useful resource if you haven't seen it yet already. It's got a whole range of things, grade specific, as well as university visits that we've been having. Virtual university visits were in here, and as well as help with your personal statement or your US college essays in here as well. But then if you scroll right down towards the end of the College Counselling tab, above the Personal Counselling, is Interviews UK and US. Select that, and you'll see where the resources for both the US and the UK style of interviews are there. So if we just quickly look at the US one, here is the webinar that Dr. Hinchey hosted last week, and you can click on there to watch that if you haven't had a chance yet. It's recorded in there, as well as some examples of questions with some advice on how to answer them below that as well. Once this webinar has been recorded, it will be uploaded just here below the map of the UK, and there'll be a video embedded there of us. And then below that, you can see a whole range of resources in there related to the UK interview. It has common questions and some advice on how to deal with them along here as well, including advice from universities in preparing for your interviews, what to say, what not to say in interviews. A very large document that has questions subject specific, as well as some tips. The Oxford and Cambridge interview PDF, more specific information on Cambridge interviews, and some other questions down below. So after the webinar, go to these resources and have a little look through to help prepare you. I'm going to take you to the common questions and modelled answers PDF. So here we've got a little tab here that pops up the PDF into a whole new window. So here we've got the questions and tips on how to go about answering them. More questions with tips, common questions with tips. As we scroll down. So you won't just get tips from this presentation, but you'll also be able to use the wide number of resources that we have in the PSL page. This question, what do you think university can offer you? Here's a modelled answer in there as well, and a range of tips and further modelled answers as well as you go down the document at the bottom. You'll also find a similar resource here called the University Interview Questions Admission Interview Tips, and again, you can browse through here, and it's a very useful tool to help get ready. Why do you want to study the subject? Why did you choose this university? What did you enjoy about your IBs or your APs? How would you describe yourself? What are your main interests? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What achievement are you most proud of? What are your career plans? Why should we offer you a place? In addition to the resources that you can find on PSL, I've just summarised how to answer some of the common admission interview questions here. If you're asked, why do you want to attend this university? Well, this is a practically guaranteed question to come up. It tests your knowledge of the university and to see what motivates you. You should think about what makes you and the university a perfect fit. Don't just talk about the location being pretty good or the course sounding good. Give detailed, thoughtful reasons by mentioning the department's approach to your subject, or if it's got strong facilities. Don't mention things like the costs or nightlife or or anything that shows that you haven't given any detailed thought to your decision. Why do you want to study this subject? This is very important as they want to know that you're genuinely interested in your subject. Perhaps you enjoyed studying the subject when you were doing your IBs or APs. Show how the subject fits in with your career goals and aspirations. What are you reading at the moment? This question will hopefully spark some discussion between you and the interviewers. So you can plan this one in advance. It gives them some insight into your personality and how genuinely interested you are in the subject. How would your friends describe you? It gives you the opportunity to talk about your personality or try to demonstrate it as well. Just try to make sure that you say something that's memorable and meaningful. Things such as you're determined or motivated, you're a natural leader or a good collaborator, or you're always keen to have a go when challenges come up. Try to focus on your strengths and highlight your strengths, and always back up what you say with examples. It's always important to back up what you're saying with examples. That goes for any question where it's appropriate. So what achievements are you most proud of? Can be anything from anything that you're personally proud of. Talk about how it positively affected you. By doing this activity will not only show your commitment, but that you've achieved this during your time when you were studying. So therefore, it's showing that you have some good time management skills. What do you like to do in your spare time can help shed light on your personality to find out if you're a good fit for the university. So mention skills that you've learnt from doing things in your spare time as well. So you're always steering it to the positive qualities that they want to find within their candidates. For example, you might have done a sport that consistently challenges you to improve yourself, or that you enjoy working in a team that helps achieve a common goal. What can you bring to the university? Back this up with examples. You can mention activities that you've been involved in outside of classroom that help contribute to the school's community. So things such as the debating society or anything else that you may have done in a service club, any kind of organizational thing that you've done within a service club, or something you've done in the Medics and Healthcare Society that I run. Here, this question is designed for you to have some meaningful thought. What's your greatest strength and weakness? Make sure you back it up with examples. And the weakness side of the question can be quite difficult and challenging to answer, but as long as you're showing that you've taken steps for improving, shows that you're quite reflective and you've got a degree of self-awareness. I often say in job interviews that gaining a strong work-life balance is a bit of a challenge for me, and it seems to go down quite well. To give you a little bit of a break from my voice, I'm going to play some music while giving you the chance to read through the next few slides of example questions in different categories as well. So some of these categories include questions that might be asked about yourself, questions about your current school, questions about the university and the degree, subject questions. If you're taking a gap year, or if you're planning to take a gap year, there's a few questions on those that you can read, as well as questions on your future plans. Questions about your current school might include questions about the university and the degree. Subject questions. Questions about gap years. So questions that you can ask the university. Remember, interviews can be a two-way process. So asking good questions can also impress the interviewer as well as giving good answers to their questions. You can find out more about their course as well as demonstrate what you know about them as well already. They'll be expecting for you to have already trawled through the whole website, and it gives you a chance to demonstrate that you've done that, as well as asking things that weren't on it. The Oxford and Cambridge interviews. So this is what Oxford and Cambridge say to expect from their interviews. Typically, it's about a 20 to 45-minute interview. There'll be problem-solving scenarios and discussion that is relevant to the course, and they're structured but relatively informal. There'll be an interactive assessment of your interest, aptitude, core knowledge and technical skill, and an assessment of your capacity to learn from mistakes and to listen in a discussion. This slide is interesting to look if you're applying to the Oxbridge universities, and pause here if that applies to you. Now we're going to look at some supplemental video clips that I've prepared to have a better idea about what's expected in the interview process.
The Cambridge interview only forms part of our assessment of our candidates. We'll look at the whole of your application, at any tests that we may ask you to sit, and especially at your record in exams. The interview itself is intended to give us a better sense of your motivation and your aptitude for the course for which you've applied. We'll also use it to get a better sense of your ability to think analytically and critically in an academic setting. We hope that this film will give you some good tips and guidance about approaching the process and preparing for interview.
Most Cambridge interviews will take place from early to mid-December, so you should make sure that you're available to attend in case you're invited to an interview. And remember, if you are invited, then confirm your actual attendance with the college that's invited you.
I think you should remind yourself why the course you've chosen to study is right for you. Do make sure you reread your UCAS application and make sure you've done everything you've mentioned in your personal statement.
I think the really important thing to remember is that you're actually preparing to study your subject at university, and that's what we're tapping into at interview. So how you've gone beyond your school curriculum, the kinds of things you've been reading, the academic debates that you've been having, that's what we want to explore with you.
Make sure your travel arrangements are such that you arrive at least probably half an hour early. When you get here, come into the Porters Lodge, come and see the porters, they know the college and they're all very friendly and helpful.
There'll be a waiting area set up where you can wait and have a chat to current students like me. While you're waiting, it's also really important to make sure you don't pay attention to how others say their interviews went.
So on the day of my interview, I came in smart trousers, a shirt and a jumper because it was really cold. Didn't want to be shivering going into the interview or anything like that. You definitely don't have to worry about what to wear. Just don't come in anything that makes you stand out in a bad way, but just something you feel confident in, really.
The details of the actual interview can vary a little depending on the subject that you've chosen or the college that you're being interviewed at. In general, you'll get 1, 2 or 3 interviews. They'll each last 20 to 40 minutes in length, and you may be interviewed by 1 person, 2 people or even 3.
Some of the things you might be asked about would include your sixth form studies, any wider reading you've done. For most subjects, work experience is of little if any relevance, but for vocational subjects, expect to be asked what you got out of it.
We're not interested in a kind of perfect, polished performance. It doesn't matter if you have to repeat yourself, if you have to ask us to repeat a question, or if you take time to answer a question. The important thing is that we're there to discuss you and your interest in your subject. My piece of advice when it comes to interviews, be yourself and back yourself.
My top tip would be to be yourself and smile.
Above all else, remember that we're not looking for perfection. We're just looking to gauge whether you're right for the course for which you've applied.
In our minds, when we're doing an interview, the sorts of things we're thinking about are whether or not the person in front of us has the right kind of background knowledge needed for our courses, whether we think they'd be successful in our kind of teaching environment. And to put it in a nutshell, really, can they think?
Hello.
Hello, hi.
Let's take a seat.
Hi, I'm Nick.
I'm Natalie. Nice to meet you.
Hello there. Just as we start this interview, I want to give you a bit of an outline of what's going to come next. So we're going to start off with a question from Nick, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some unseen material. At the end of the interview, there'll be some time for you to ask any questions. If you have any, you don't have to have any. If there's anything that we say that doesn't make sense or that you'd like us to repeat or rephrase, please do just say. We'd be more than happy to do that. Okay?
And we will make notes as we go along as well. Please don't be thrown by that. Okay?
students.
What we're expecting out of students in those interviews is firstly that they are listening really carefully to what they're being asked. And we're interested to find out how people are thinking. So in their responses, if they can take us through their own thought processes, then that's great, because it means that we can see how they're exploring those ideas.
We'll start off, Angharad, by talking to you about the essays that you've sent in, and then we'll move on to one or two other topics that come out of your personal statement as the interview goes on.
In one of your essays, you were talking about the theory of functionalism, that things are kind of designed for purpose. In your archaeological or anthropological reading, have you come across that as an idea, as a sort of a school of thought?
Definitely interlinkings between sociology and especially social anthropology and that idea. Like society works as a body through the organs. It's not necessarily something I believe in. I don't think the problem with these kind of broad theories they generalise too much, I think, and there are too many exceptions.
We will often make use of a student's UCAS personal statement and their supplementary questionnaire that they fill in specifically for Cambridge. We're not evaluating the quality of their writing in the statement. We're asking them to say some more about things they have told us about themselves, about their extracurricular academic engagement, and about their interest in the subject that they want to read.
Angharad, I was interested to see that in your personal statement you mention archaeology and that you've been doing some things in that field after you've finished your A-levels. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've been doing and how you've been exploring that area?
For a technical interview like natural sciences or engineering or mathematics, then what we're looking for is how teachable they are. We're looking at how interested in the material they are, how they can take an idea and develop that, even if it's something that they perhaps haven't necessarily seen before. So it's going to start by sketching a function, and the function that I'm going to write down you've probably not seen before, but I'm fairly sure that you've all seen the pieces of that function. Okay. So if I write down the function is y is equal to sine x divided by x. Okay, and what I would like you to do is sketch the behaviour of that function between minus 2 pi and 2 pi, and so if you can sketch some axes for me and give that a go.
First of all, I'm going to start and get some of the main points that I need to work out. So I'm going to start with x is equal to 0.
Okay, so if I can just stop you there for a second, because x is equal to 0 is a little bit tricky. So choosing some points is a good idea, absolutely, but we might just come back to that one. So are there any other points that you know the values of?
Pi is a fairly good one.
Okay.
So sine of pi will be 0, and so 0 divided by pi is 0.
Excellent.
The single piece of advice I'd give any student coming for interview is to listen carefully to the questions that they're being asked.
And if you don't understand a word, ask for clarification.
Be yourself as much as possible. We are assessing you to see whether we can teach you effectively. So the more you are like you in your interview, the better.
Now, I've prepared a couple of activities that you might find useful to help prepare you for an interview. For any of you students that are looking at preparing later on the PSL page, you'll be able to pause the video at this point when you see the task and to work on the task itself. So I think this is a very good thing to highlight, that there are tasks you can do to help prepare yourself for. So one activity is preparing answers using the STAR method. Using this allows you to evidence situations that have enabled you to develop some skills and experiences that are relevant to your course. So when answering, think STAR. First, think about what situation you were in and give the interviewer a brief idea about what situation you were facing and the role that you were playing. Then talk about the task, T for STAR. What were the main issues involved with the situation and what was needed to be done? Then start talking about what action you had in order to try to achieve the desired outcome and what obstacles had to be overcome as well. And then finally, what was the result or the outcome from this process? So you can see an example here where a student has filled out something in each section of the situation, task, action, and result. When thinking about common questions, you could then start to think about the STAR approach and try to help prepare yourself with some of the things that you could be talking about in that interview. I hope that comes across useful. And then there is another activity that you could use some of the common questions on to help with your responses, which is more of a mind map and a brainstorming activity. Put the subject that you're doing in the center, and then in the circles, you can add any new research that's being done in the area, add in any related news stories that are relevant, topics in your subject area that go past what your syllabus delivers that you know about, as well as any journals that you've read or relevant websites. You can start writing some of your ideas and your thoughts on the lines going towards each circle as well. So that's the end of the presentation part. I hope that's been helpful. What I'm going to do is open up for questions. Please make sure that you ask any questions in the chat box as soon as it's been enabled. Within seconds, it will be enabled. And please remember, any question is not a stupid question. I'm happy to answer any question, no matter how simple you might think it is. Okay, so I know that was quite a long presentation. Hopefully, I still have all of your attention. Really, this is a chance for you to give me some questions. I made a mistake. It's not in the chat function. The chat function is disabled. It's in the Q&A section. So if you have any questions at this stage, just click onto the Q&A section and please type them in there, and then I'll read them out and try to answer them as we're going along. However, as part of the registration process, I tried to answer as many of the questions as I could that were coming in, but there are a few that I felt that I haven't quite addressed yet. So first one was, how important is it to mention SATs in interviews? Well, let the interviewer guide you into this, is my answer to that. Some interviewers will ask how you were doing, how you were, what your grades were and how you're doing, but they've actually seen that as part of your UCAS application as well. So the majority of the time, they'll actually know what your SAT scores are before you go to interview, and that may actually inform them or be part of informing them as to whether or not they want to interview you in the first place. How do I find out whether the course I'm interested in will require an interview? I'm just going to answer that live. That's just come through. Thank you. As I mentioned in the presentation, go to the course website of those universities that you're interested in. But really what comes first is you making a list of best fit universities first. So doing your research on the different types of universities and the courses that you're interested in, work hand in hand with your college counsellor on that. And then from there, trawl through the website to see whether or not they do interview. And then if you have been given a conditional offer, you may actually find in Track, which is on the, once you've made your application, there's something called Track where you can track your offers there. And in there, it will tell you if you're going to interview or not as well. And they'll give you plenty of time and notice as well. How important are clubs and extracurricular activities? Well, it depends how you reflect on your extracurricular activities, to be honest. So only like 2 to 3 throughout the whole of high school. So as part of your personal statement, you'll be writing about not just your academics and your interest in the subject you're applying to, but you'll also be talking about your extracurricular activities as well. So they would have hopefully had a chance to read a little bit about those extracurricular activities in your personal statement, and then the interview may give you a chance to elaborate on them further and actually reflect upon those, so you can talk about what you've learnt from it and what kind of impact you've had on the ACS community as a result of doing those as well. Okay, what specific websites, resources do you know of that can provide us with example questions? So on the PSL page where I was trying to show you when I was screen sharing, if you go to high school, then you go to college counselling, and then you go click on college counselling, and at the bottom of the college counselling sub pages, you will find interviews, a tab called interviews there. Click on that, and there's a whole slew of different examples of questions and things to consider whilst answering those questions in the PSL. So simple answer, PSL page. Will you offer interview training? So what we do in November is we often you'll find this on the calendar events calendar on the calendar of events for college counselling. You'll find that you can make a request with your individual college counsellor, make a request for you to have a mock interview with us. So talk to your college counsellor for that if you're interested in doing that. Next question is, will there be a talk about personal statement? Yes. So in grade 11, what happens is we go into around about March time, we go into the English lessons, and we arrange time for myself and Dr. Hinchy come in and talk to you in English lessons to deliver what the personal statement is and how to write it, and give you example personal statements as well. And that's a whole separate other topic. But yeah, that will be coming closer to the time when it's appropriate for you. I'm assuming you're in grade 11 if you're asking that question. And if you're in grade 10 and you're wondering about that, we'll put that on pause until you're in grade 11. You need a little bit of time in grade 11 to actually do your courses, work on getting good grades, have a little bit of time where you've been involved in some clubs to then be able to reflect upon that in your personal statement. So we don't do it straight away when you're in grade 11, because you need time to do things within the school community and within your classes first to then be able to talk about it in your personal statement. So we come March time for helping your personal statements. How do you know your UCAS points? I'm assuming you're wondering about the entry requirements to courses that you're interested in. That's something you work with your personal, with your college counsellor on as part of your research for your courses that you do. And that will start January onwards. So if you're in grade 11. So spend a bit of time researching through Bridge U first. And then we can get to the specifics of starting to narrow down a list that is a best fit for you from then. And the UCAS points or entry requirements are closely associated with that. And it's a dynamic list which can change throughout your grade 11 and early grade 12 as well. As you go throughout your AP and your IB courses, your grades may change, or you get a better idea about what kind of level of attainment you're at. So therefore you've got a better and clearer idea about what universities fit you better. And UCAS points is related to entry requirements and level of attainment. What's the difference between a panel style interview and an MMI if it's being conducted via Zoom? Okay, so due to the pandemic, there is a lot more Zoom and Skype and Teams style interviews. A panel style interview is one where you're going to have more than one person, several people in the same place at the same time asking you a series of questions. Whereas an MMI is, there are a range of different stations which you will go to, and each different station will have a different interviewer, and they'll be asking pretty much the same or similar questions to all of the candidates that come to their table. So MMI is really for medical applications, as well as veterinary sciences and dentistry. And so they will have, for example, a table where they're discussing questions that will test you on your empathy or on your knowledge of medical ethics, which is what we do in the Medics and Healthcare Society to help prepare for those questions. And the panel style is basically, as I said before, you're in, so you have a range of different people asking questions in one place. So you may have a room of people, hopefully socially distanced for those if you're on Zoom, whereas with MMI, you'll be going to different rooms within a Zoom call. Okay, I'm not sure if you call it a Zoom call, but a Zoom meeting. Okay, so what if you have not done anything in the school community? You were saying this is about the personal statement. Basically, being as involved as much as you can outside the classroom is always going to benefit you in your application at university. So if this is you and you're not in grades 12, and so therefore you've still got time to start getting involved in the community, I would suggest you start trying to get involved now. If you're doing IB, there's a certain element of service and action. You know, the CAS program, it's part of it, but if you are doing high school diploma and or APs as well, and you haven't been steered into being regularly involved in extracurricular activities, I suggest that you start thinking about it, if only for your applications for university. So even if you're not asked for interview, it will help you with your personal statements. Okay, so I'm just going to click answered live to all of these questions. Okay, I think I've got through all of those questions that were just typed in the Q&A box. Thank you for those questions. It's really nice to have those. Good to see there's lots of people engaged in this topic. I had another question come through in the registration process. How do I prepare? How do I present myself? Well, hopefully that's come across in the presentation already. There were some tips on how to prepare. If you want to look over this again, you can find it on the PSL page under interviews where I showed you before, and get to that section, play it again. Failing that, you can always come in to speak to your college counsellor and have a little chat about that if you want some more clarification on that as well. Okay, so hopefully that's answered that question. Another question, what questions will we get in interview? So hopefully the questions that I've shown in the presentation helps answer that, as well as the questions that you have in the PSL page. And it asks about Imperial. So I can't tell you exactly what questions you'll have in it if you were to apply to Imperial and been offered an interview, but at the bottom of the PSL page on the UK side, you'll find a range of coloured questions in some PDFs. And those are for Oxbridge questions, but they could also be quite, because they are evaluative style questions, they're also relevant for Imperial as well. Timing course combinations. I'm not sure I really understand this question. Timing and course combinations. If that was your question, could you type it in the Q&A just to make it a little bit more clearer and put it into more of a sentence for me to understand. Ideal grades required, specific extracurricular activities, and the process of scholarship. So first of all, with scholarship, that's a whole separate area to look into, something to speak to with your college counsellor. We also will try to accommodate for giving information out in relation to scholarships later on as well. Ideal grades required, that depends on the course, that depends on the subject. Speak to your college counsellor, work individually with your college counsellor to get a little bit more of an idea about which specific courses you're interested in and therefore what kind of grades are expected. Each different university will have different entry requirements, so it's a case of working with your college counsellor to try to find to try and match up the attainment that you're working at with a university with a level of, with an entry requirement at a similar kind of level, some slightly above for reach, some slightly below simply for safety, and some around the range of attainment that you're getting in class at the present as well. Okay, but that's a college counsellor one-on-one kind of a question. Are internships required? I'm assuming you mean by work experience. Work experience and internships can be reflected upon within an interview as long as it's basically the same answer as extracurricular activities. They're interested to know more about you. They're interested to know what your passions are, what your skills are, whether that be transferable skills or skills directly related to the course you're applying to. So if you have done some work experience or an internship that has helped your application in terms of some skills or subject knowledge, then mention it in the interview, discuss it in your personal statement, and that comes across to those that are deciding whether or not you are a good fit for their university. And are there any other tests in the UK universities? So yes, there are some additional tests outside of the ones that you do at school. If you're doing APs, it's a good idea to have some SATs or ACTs to supplement your APs and your high school regular diploma courses. If you're applying for law, for example, there's about 8 or 9 universities that require you to take a specific test for law called the LNAT. If you are applying to medicine, you have the choice. Some universities require you to do something called a UCAT, and other universities will require you to do a BMAT. So it depends on the course that you're applying to, but in general, there aren't a large number of additional tests to do. It depends on the subject that you're applying for. And there are a range of additional tests to do for Oxbridge University courses as well. So for example, there's a MAT test for mathematics at Oxford. What's the process of applying to university? I think that is a question to ask your college counsellor. I'm assuming you're not in grade 12, so speak to your college counsellor about that. But we do send out information as and when is the time that you need to know it. So don't worry, you won't be in a situation where you don't know something at the time that you need to know it. Some more questions that are coming through on the Q&A. Do extracurricular activities have to be in school? No, they don't. They can also be things that you've done outside of school as well. I should have mentioned that as well. Anything that suggests that you will be an active member of the community and you are developing a range of skills is always good to use and include in your application, whether that be in the interview, if you have an interview that is, or whether or not it is in your personal statement. What if I don't really contribute to the school community, but I do activities outside the school? I think that answers the last question. I think it has answered this question. You can include activities both in and out of the school in the process, okay? And I think that brings us to the end of the questions. I'll just give a couple of more minutes, 30 seconds or so, for you to frantically type in some questions if you have any more questions that haven't been answered. Once again, thank you for the questions. Okay, so I understand that there may have been a bit of confusion initially about which time this presentation starts. So if you weren't able to get to the start of this presentation, then sorry about that. But it is okay, because as I've said before, this presentation is being recorded and it will be uploaded into the PSL page where I showed you under the interviews section under college counsellors. Okay, and just as a general note as well, if in doubt, check the College Counselling PSL page. There's a wealth of information there, including resources on personal statements and US Common App essays, as well as US supplemental essays as well. Lots of information there, as well as to-do lists under grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. So if you're in grade 9 and you're wondering, what do I do? You can click on the grade 9 tab and read the to-do list and start working your way through that and ask us questions if there's something that you don't understand or want help with. If you're in grade 10, do the same. Click on the grade 10 tab in the PSL page, have a read of the to-do list in there, the things that a grade 10 needs to consider and to to do as part of preparing for their application, as well as grade 11. Click on the grade 11 tab and look at that to-do list there. And as there are no more questions coming through, I'm going to assume that everything has been answered. If it hasn't been answered and you wish to ask me any further questions, please either send me an email. My email is jforrester, spelt with 2 R's, at acs/schools.com. So either send me an email, you can send Dr. Hinchy an email, rhinchy@acs/schools.com, or you can drop into the college counselling office and arrange a time, or email us to arrange a time as well. We do prefer emails being sent first, just because we're busy with the seniors at the moment, trying to get them prepared in their applications as well. Okay, so thank you very much and have a good evening, and I look forward to potentially getting some more emails in the morning. Okay, thanks very much.